Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All with Dr. Scott Walter. Yet again, I know we're trying to figure this out. We are coming to you from beautiful Muskegon, Michigan. It is just across the dunes is Lake Michigan, and it looks like an ocean. It's very beautiful. People are out kite surfing, and
it's incredible.
It's beautiful.
I mean, it's the beach. It looks like you're at the beach.
It really
However, no salt, no sharks.
There you go. So if you like the beach but no salt, no sharks, there you go. Mm-hmm. And if you happen to be at Tesla Takeover today, we will be there in just a couple of hours, actually. So we will see you very, very soon. If not, you should plan to come next year if you can't come this year, because it is beautiful. And
next year is going to be Tesla Con. It's going to be the big one.
Oh, so there you go. Yeah. We got it good. Mm-hmm. So today we are going to talk about the factory tour, the shareholder meeting, behind the scenes. I think I'm just going to start with the emotions. So we want to talk to you about things that you might not have seen if you watched the live stream, or if you didn't even bother watching the live stream, well, then you'll get some information. But so I don't know, what was the vibe?
Oh, it was very upbeat. Because going in, the tension had been broken because we already knew from the night before the way the shareholder vote was going to go.
Right.
And you knew right away because the opening remarks was, "Welcome to Texas."
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, Robin. Yeah, when she did.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it had two meetings at that point.
Right.
And everyone kind of knew. And then it was just sort of waiting for the moment that after we went through all the formalities of having Elon.
Oh, which, by the way, oh my gosh, those shareholder whatever proxy things, I don't know, they're so
I mean,
dull.
they're really poorly done. They don't understand. It seems like they are kind of trying to go towards their base. They're appealing to their base, and they're not really trying to be persuasive anyway. So they're very ad hominem. They're attacking, and they're unprofessional in a way. And either that, some of them were recorded.
Okay, well, this one was at least better than last year, because last year there were some people who are like, "Am I on? Am I on?" And then they had to Zoom and with the echoes.
They had a really bad phone connection. There was one that was that way. You could tell he had like a speakerphone that he was using, and it was like really poorly done. The others realized that you needed to actually record it to make sure you had it.
But then they didn't have like a professional voice actor or something. I mean, there's Jiminy Cricket who is doing hers. So.
Well, yeah, we refer to it as it sounded like Sky on Helium.
Exactly.
It was just, I mean, you and I could not stop laughing because it was such a high pitch. And then her name was like Constant Crickets.
Yes, that's why I said Jiminy Crickets. I was like, yeah.
And then the one right after it, I think, was definitely AI generated. Because it talked about deep sea mining and stuff like that, and all the competitors that have signed up for this, and mentioned BMW and Renault.
Yes.
And everyone knows it's not Renault, it's Renault. So either the AI mispronounced it, or whoever the professional was, which meant the people who were doing this didn't vet the recording.
Exactly. You got to QA the recording. So anyway, because I told the Germans, Hans and Robin, were yesterday when we were meeting beforehand, and I said, and they said Renault, and they were just like, oh.
Yeah. It's this. I mean, it tells me they're really not serious about getting these things to pass.
Exactly. Although, did you see two of them actually passed?
Yeah, two of them, but in some of those may have been kind of sleepers, and that we didn't quite understand what's going on. But some of the others where they took a very aggressive tone, they were not persuasive. And it seems like you go to the effort to put it on there, at least you can put together a 3-minute persuasive argument.
Exactly.
And they refuse to do that.
Well, and then I think Elon was saying that they're going to have to come up with like a word limit or something that's less than 3 minutes, because oh my gosh, it's just like when you get 7 of them, that's 20, 21 minutes of plus all the transition time. So it's like, oh my. So a sleeper, snooze fest. Anyway, so that part unimportant. I think it would have been utterly tense if it had not been for Elon posting that graph the night before. Like, I think because I wouldn't have known. I mean, I wouldn't freaking know. So, but it was that graph, by the way, for anybody who voted, good for you, because like the last minute, it was like doing your homework. It was like, you get assigned something 2 months ahead of time, and you're like, I'll get there. And then all of a sudden, the amount of work you put in, it goes like the day before it's due. But like everybody seemed to vote at the last possible second. So
and part of it was probably that you had some shareholders couldn't vote up until that point because there were so many.
Yeah, there were so many things in the way. So if you were unable to vote because your brokerage disabled, you should probably look for a new brokerage if you care. I mean, maybe you don't.
But that might change because Alexandra knocked over a lot of apple carts, and a lot of them were being forced to do it. And they were very upset that suddenly they have to do what they should have been doing all along.
Yeah, exactly.
And realizing that, wait a minute, if we don't actually do this, we might be open to a class action suit.
Exactly.
So a lot of them moved very quickly, realizing we actually have to allow the people who own the shares to actually vote their shares. We can't do it for them or refuse to do it.
Right.
So I think, they probably would have also lost their licenses to be able to do that if they are now providing the service that they really are supposed to provide.
And I'm not advocating for E-Trade or Charles Schwab owns them, right? I think, but anyway, they're great. They just send an email and it's like, click this link, vote your shares. So
some of them were easy and others are difficult, and some depends upon whether you have like a financial planner that may actually be
who's like a middleman
and then that gets confusing and they can't do it, and so you have to actually check with them to make sure that next year you were able to do it. And then now the day before we made a prediction, we were both confident that Elon's pay package would pass. We weren't sure.
If you haven't seen that, check it out.
But we we were kind of indecisive. I thought Texas, if it passed, would be like thin margins, and you thought like there was no chance because the bar for that was much higher.
I didn't think there was no chance. I just thought it was unlikely.
Yeah, with Elon's package, I think it was 50% of shares voted.
Yes.
And Elon was not allowed to vote, and Kimball was not allowed to vote, but with shares voted. So if someone abstained or something like that, it didn't count.
Right.
But for the move to Texas,
it was a literal vote.
It was literally a no vote.
Right.
So an abstain. So you actually had to get 50% of outstanding
and there's
shares.
like 3.15 billion shares out, which meant it was like 1.54
small chance of it making it. And it turned out it did
60%.
better than Elon's. There was like 2 billion that were actually for the move. So it was like, and I think that surprised everyone. It passed resoundingly.
And by the way, again, I think I've said this before, but if you were anything to do with business or Delaware government, this was actually the judgment was a bad day previous to this. This was a really bad day because this is going to open the floodgates. Assuming this all goes through and everything, that means a lot of companies are going to be rethinking their state of incorporation, and Delaware, it's a big business there. They've got lawyers, they've got the little P.O. boxes you have to rent every year and all that kind of stuff. It's just, anyway, it's a big business for them, and it's a big loss. Let's save the Elon talk until the end. Let's talk about the factory tour. So this was something, no photography, no recordings, obviously, so we'll have to do this from memory. They did not say we couldn't talk about it, though, so hopefully Tesla won't care, but we won't get into incredible minute detail. But what sort of, mostly we saw the end of line for the Model Y, and then a lot of the line for the Cybertruck, which was very cool.
So we saw a lot, and
it was operational. I mean, they were building these things as we were watching.
So the difference is that for the Cybertruck event, you got the same tour of
basically, but it was just frozen.
It was not moving. In this case, it was moving, and you could see the production was going on there, and it was moving at a pretty good clip. So I felt like, oh, okay, so the production is not low. It seems like they're getting a reasonable number coming through there. I mean, a lot of automation. One of the first things I was doing is, okay, let's find all the low-hanging fruit where Optimus could go and potentially do anything. And I'm always like, man, they're already automated a lot of this already.
But there were a lot of people there.
Yes, there were a lot of people.
Like I was just thinking about the building of the drive units and stuff. They have like these platens kind of with like things sticking up, and people just like, they take apart, they put it onto the spot, it moves down to the next thing, and slowly they build up. So that seems like an obvious place where Optimus could put a part on.
And there's a little bit of part handling of that. We constantly had to get out of the way because you have the aisleways, you have these tuggers that are going through that have these little wagons on there. They're constantly resupplying the line everywhere they have to go.
Right.
And before the line, you have what they call these gravity feed conveyors, where you just take these boxes and you slip them in.
Right.
And that way, anything that you need, whether it's nuts, bolts, fasteners, the actual part itself. Now, some of them that are very small, they basically, they have enough for an entire shift or a couple of shifts over there. Right. But they have these larger parts that are constantly having to go through. So the thing you realize is that there is like the circulation system going on there.
Right.
Things are constantly
That's actually
moving.
a good way to think about it. It's like blood flowing.
It's logistics. So they've got to make sure everything's supplied.
That's honestly my biggest takeaway always when I do these factory tours is the supply chain logistics. Just
internally.
Internally, but also externally. All these parts have to arrive at the factory, whether it's raw materials or a disc or something for disc, whatever it is, all of this stuff has to be there. And if one thing isn't there, the whole thing shuts down.
Now, the way they've changed it is that it used to be that a supplier would deliver stuff and it would go in a warehouse somewhere, and then eventually you put it in there. And now what they've done is that the truck comes in, and basically the truck is the container. Yeah. So they have it all the way around the factory, and they make sure it's very close to where it needs to be.
Right.
So the travel distance is very short. But at the same time, you need to have a really good MES system that knows what parts need to be where, when, and they're constantly tracking that. So it's like setting up a train schedule or something like that, knowing what it is. In many cases, these tuggers are leaving at a certain time. They almost have a schedule, say, okay, we know you're going to consume this many parts by a certain time. We've got to get out there. And those would be the bigger ones. And so, but there's a lot of loading and offloading in that you could see manuals like, well, okay, that's kind of the low-hanging fruit that potentially you could see Optimus going in and doing.
And I actually did the tour twice. I wanted to go back with Scott, but the first time, it was different the second time, but the first time I went through, that sort of like just at the end of the Model Y ramp, there was the AGVs, the autonomous guided vehicles, there was a bunch of them that were driving Cybertruck, like half-built bodies around. So I don't know why, just for whatever reason, that wasn't happening the second time around, but it was just interesting how they were like just moving, you know, because the AGVs are big for the Cybertruck. Those suckers are huge. Yeah. So yeah, and anyway, and they're just like going like real slow around, and then so they had we talked to them. There's like most of it I think was south to north. I think that was the direction most of it was heading. And then there's an upper level where you couldn't really see it, and it's going backwards, and then it feeds it down. And so it's kind of like this, and it goes up, and it goes back, and it goes down again, and it feeds back. And then the last part is down to the south, because like that's where the final body, like, they didn't show us that part, but where they put it together. And during the Cybertruck reveal or whatever, the thing back in November, they had the big light bar thing that they drove it through. So there were no trucks in there at the time, but we kind of, that was where the actual event was. If you saw Elon walking out with all the lights.
And that's the inspection station. So
exactly.
So it's there, it's fully illuminated, so any imperfections will reveal themselves.
And I mean, this thing it's working. I heard a record of 1,300 Cybertrucks a week. And then they were saying, I think they're down to one shift for the Model Y, and we won't talk about this. Anyway, we'll talk about this later. But the Model Y, these things are just rolling off all the time. We didn't get to see the Cybertruck end of line, but the Model Y, it's like they're just like boop. They drop down. The people get in. They look at it. They drive it off. And outside, as we were taking the bus or getting the food or something, you just see Cybertruck, Model Y, Cybertruck. Yeah, I mean they're just driving it down the road to get to the parking lot, which of course the Boring Company just built the half a tunnel. So I guess they're into the data center in the south, which by the way looks so cool, like all those huge windows. And now they're going to turn it around and drive it back over, and it's going to go underground, so it gets on the other side of the highway where the big parking lot is, so that they can deliver the trucks without having to deal with traffic and stuff.
And speaking of the cool thing is that because this was such a big event and so many Tesla drivers are going to be going there, they didn't have enough supercharging.
Oh yeah, that was cool.
A lot of it.
Yeah, I've got a video about that too, so check it out.
Yeah, and it's really cool that they have a trailer with a mega pack on there and with 8 superchargers on there, and it's a pop-up supercharger they can bring wherever they want.
And it's a semi-trailer, so you just hook it up to a truck and drive it wherever you need it.
Now we were trying to figure out like how do they charge that thing, because usually they drop it off at a supercharger location to augment it, so you can like maybe double or at least add later. And it's like, well, where are they going to get the electricity? It's like, well, they already have electricity there, so potentially maybe in the off hours before the peak, it's either already coming charged, or they may be able to charge it from the superchargers that are there, or somehow tap into it. So there's some way they're being able to do it. Yeah. It's not like they're dropping it in the middle of nowhere. Now, it did have a solar panel.
It did.
They had like one teeny little solar panel.
But I was like, I mean, maybe for
they're
the
not
cooling.
charging it for that.
I know, no. I mean, that was maybe like 3 or 4 months.
And I'm still trying to figure out, I was like, wait a minute, you get this much power there. Why do you need a solar panel? And it must be if they have to boot something.
Or maybe just for part of the cooling system or something. I don't know. Anyway, it's pretty impressive. Like, it's very quiet, but there's enough electricity flowing that when you get up next to it, it's like you can, it's kind of like humming in the transformers and the whatever.
You're able to charge 8 Teslas at the same time.
Yeah, it was really cool. I don't know how many Teslas drive it in, charge it up, drive it out, how many you could do, but it's a lot because it's a big battery. So they should, instead of mega pack, they should just call it big ass battery.
Yeah, it is. It's a big ass. It's like one of those battery packs you put in the back of your phone.
Yeah, exactly. You've got your little phone and you've got that big battery that's like how many times you can charge it. Okay, anything else about the factory tour? I love the monitors and stuff, without going into too much detail, but it showed.
Now, they had a bigger space than last year, so this time it was like the lobby. You went in, you didn't go upstairs to a smaller one.
To a smaller
This
room.
was much larger. I think Alexander said it was maybe 3 times the number.
Oh, was it?
Okay. Possible. And that might have been why it was so easy for us to get there, because all the plus ones, there was plenty that was able to come.
Yeah. So it was pretty cool, and thank you to Michael and to
Wes Decker, who invited us, and it was great hanging out with them, and they
it was really good.
Enjoyed it as well.
Hi guys,
so
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was very, very cool. Let's see what else. I'm trying to think like factory stuff before we move on. Any other sort of big picture revelations from behind the scenes?
There wasn't much. I mean, we were able to confirm that Optimus was not there.
Yeah,
of course, that was
bummer.
during that it's in Fremont.
Right.
However, I think a little bit of news that kind of came in a post a few hours ago, and that is we know there's 2 Optimi in Fremont doing the battery line there. But Julian Eberts, who is on the team, said, "How long do you think before we have 10 operating?"
Yes, that's right.
And it's like, when he says
wink,
10,
wink.
there's a couple of things that mean. First, it means at least you have at least 10 bots, right? You probably already have them out there, and you've probably already considered it. And when you're asking a question like that, I have a feeling we're going to get an announcement in the next week or two saying, "Oh, we're doing something else," and it may be different than battery placement.
I think also there's a little the pre-roll that they did before Elon came out. I think that a little chunk of that video was actually the Fremont factory, because it was a new chunk where he was taking it off the line. It was a different setup.
It was a different setup.
So that
it was still the battery placement.
Yeah, exactly. But it was a different setup, and I was like, I think that might be the actual line.
Right.
So do you think it's like? Do you think it's a Cato Road like pilot line where they're like?
Well, that's where I suspect. Yeah,
because that's where the battery production
that's
would be
where the
done.
battery is,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it also sounds like they said it is doing useful work. So that means the rate must be enough, and the duration must be.
Yeah, and they
enough
showed a
to be
clip
able to
of that new stuff. They showed like a point of view clip where it put it in wrong and then it picked it up and replaced
So it was a little bit more than what we saw
Yeah.
3 or 4 weeks ago when they first revealed that it was kind of going down there in the battery line.
Right, exactly. So anyway, so they're training it to do that. I have no idea what sort of rate it's able to learn. Clearly, Elon, when he was talking in his speech, was saying that eventually, and I want to get to this because it's really cool, but eventually it would be able to kind of zero-shot learn new tasks. So it's a ways to go before it gets to that. But zero-shot means that it's learned whatever it's learned, but then it's like, oh, you have to pick up this coffee cup and move it over here. That's your job. Why? I don't know why. But anyway, but it would be able to like just either you tell it or show it once.
Right. You're saying you would show it. So right now it's telerobotically, which means the bot is sort of seeing the actions as the arms move around and knows what to do. The other is that I'd be sitting here as the bot and John would move that and he said, oh, this is what I want you to do. And I would observe it and understand that I have to do the same thing.
Right.
But realizing that I'm sort of seeing it from his point of view, so if I happen to go over there, I know what to do.
Right. So that requires, so the teleoperation is complicated for a human, of course, because you're looking through goggles, and it's also very hard to scale that because you have to have a suit and you have to have the. But the other way requires a pretty significant coordinate transformation inside. But as I said in my previous video, that's linear algebra. Coordinate transformations are linear algebra, and that's a function, and something that neural networks are really good at is learning functions. So it's like, well, that's a learnable thing to like go from here to like
One
over
point
here.
of view to the other.
Yeah. So.
And that's generally how we teach people to do tasks anyways. Is like, you know, I will show you what's going on and then you observe it and then you say, oh, okay.
And then you like switch places.
Oh, I see he's using his right arm, so I would use my right arm.
Right.
I see he's grabbing this particular way and you can imagine that.
Right.
And that would be the best way. That would be a lot easier than saying, because, you know, the old saying is a picture's worth 1,000 words.
Exactly.
And in this case, video is probably worth, you know, a megabyte of words.
Yeah, and that's I mean, that's what Jan LeCun talks about too. That's why he says embodied AI is going to get to AGI first, because he says that basically all of his comparison is that all of the words that we've ever written that's on the internet is comparable to what a 4-year-old gets by the time they're 4, like just because of all the visual information is so much higher density.
Much richer.
So, and so it requires that the bot become very, very intelligent first, because it's got to have all of that background information already in place to build on.
Yeah.
And then once it can do that, it's like a person. You wouldn't take a 4-year-old into the factory and tell them, because they probably wouldn't understand it, regardless of the emotional, the kid running around and stuff. But I'm just saying, I'm just watching this little girl here. So but it takes a certain amount of time for a human to get to the state where we're capable of somebody going like, yeah, this is what I want you to do, and the person can like mentally do the gymnastics to figure out how to do that. But once you get there, then you can learn things. So that's what they're building Optimus right now, and that not just Tesla. Figure's doing that, Sanctuary's doing that, Apptronic's doing that. You're seeing them trying to build the basic level of understanding and capability of it. So.
And I would say that Elon spoke quite a bit about Optimus and the long-term possibilities, giving, let's say, some more concrete numbers. First he talked about the ARK Invest analysis of the robotaxi, saying that's like the best one he's seen.
Right.
But that, he also mentioned what everyone else said, the elephant in the room is like, well, wait a minute, they didn't talk at all about Optimus. They kept it out, and why is that?
Right.
And
well, they were explicit about that. They said we're not taking account of it in our evaluation.
Yeah, they said explicitly, and part of it could be because it might be a longer term horizon that might be beyond like the 5-year.
Right.
The other is that we know they've done analysis. We know they've been looking into it. It's just that they probably ran the numbers and go, this is even a crazy prediction for ARK Invest.
Yeah.
That it's so far off, what it could be. And Elon talked about that. And then, CERN, Basher has been putting out numbers. And again, he's always said his numbers are nutty. He keeps on trying to scale them back.
Right.
And then posted something of that, Elon's evaluation is pessimistic because he feels
exactly.
it's way more evaluation and going in analysis and he got a like what I think it was maybe from Milan or something.
Milan liked it.
Kind of liked CERN's post on that. So it's kind of this indication that everyone knows that if this takes off, and it can take off, it is just going to be crazy, and no one can really work out the numbers because it just gets too nutty. But the main thing is to say it's going to affect the bottom line of Tesla in a couple of places.
I think a good analogy, and that's not perfect, but a good analogy would be to dial it back to the early 1900s. Mm-hmm. And if there had been forecasters out there when the first cars came out, and they said, what is the future? Think about the commercial. The entire world is different right now. We just drove from Detroit to Muskegon, which is like not a big deal. If it was a horse and buggy, that's like a whole trip, right? I mean, that's multiple days, and so it's just like if you kind of could imagine yourself back in the early 1900s before there were very many cars, and people are like, well, what's the market opportunity of a car? And you're like, it's just it would have been impossible for people to even imagine how big of a transformative effect it's had on society.
And even then, I think Brian White made a really hilarious argument yesterday.
Which, by the way, Brian will be there today too.
Yeah, he'll be there. He, about Starlink will never work, and he took the 2019 perspective. He says, in order for it, do you know how many satellites you have to put? You have to launch more satellites than have ever been launched. That's just not possible. And you would have to have a cadence, which would be a couple of times a week, and you would probably have to reuse these vehicles up to 20 times.
Right.
And the launch cost, you know how much it costs to launch? It's like $250 million a launch.
Right.
Impossible. There's no way that could work. Because you're in that perspective and you're looking at it and you agree. It's like, if I went back to 2019, he says, if I was an investor in 2019 and that was being pitched to me, I would have said no because it just seems nuts.
Right.
All right? We're in the same situation here that what's happening with the humanoid bot revolution is that it seems nuts, it seems crazy, but the potential is there for sure. And we learned some information that kind of confirms what we thought all along, is that at scale, Elon believes that the production cost would be around $10,000.
Which, by the way, I had to give him a fist bump because he was dead on.
Yeah. And that the sale
I think
price,
Sandy Monroe too.
The sale price would be around 20.
Yeah.
No, actually, Sandy was much higher.
Oh, he was. Oh, okay.
Sandy was closer to 100,000.
Well, he may have been thinking more short term, but
at scale, that's what be. And then so you're able to get that. We also get a bit more detail about the hand, and that there will be another generation. So he's talked about that.
But not just the hand, but the whole body.
There's another revision coming out of the hardware before they get really ready to scale it up. And that's
but only one. I mean, that was the cool part. He said we're going to do another rev that'll be around the end of the year, and then we'll scale. So it's not like two more, three more. So it looks like scaling could happen early 2025.
Also said that the expectation of about 1,000. That came in the Q&A.
Right.
He said 1,000, and I was like, okay. For sure, I felt they could have 100 next year. 1,000 would be a stretch goal, and it was nice to be able to hear they said that they could do 1,000.
Well, but then he also said, and it will scale up rapidly after that.
So
and that's what it's going to hockey stick.
I think Jim Fant's something like gradually, then all of a sudden.
Yeah,
is his
that's
turn.
Right. He always says that.
That's what it's all going to be. And so that 1,000 is kind of that magic number. That once you hit that, it just takes off because you have all sorts of training data. You have all sorts of confirmation.
Well, and you also begin to have that virtuous cycle of it's basically giving birth to itself, because every bot that's on the line, I mean, assuming that they don't sell them, but if they use them for a period of time in their factories, that's some labor that can go into building the next bot. And so you get this thing, every bot that you've got is worth more than a bot because it's replacing some human labor or augmenting it. Because one of the things, the factory tour that's really amazing is how many people are there. There's so much automation. It's incredible how much they've automated, but there are thousands of people that are just doing whatever they're doing. So that all of that and all those people require onboarding, they require, break time, they require, you just have to hire them. I mean, there's just not enough people to hire if you start thinking about building this number. So the fact that you've got these bots.
You need parking spaces for them.
There's
a lot of infrastructure that
Oh my
goes
gosh,
to
speaking of
having
which,
an
the
employee.
parking deck there is huge.
But
everybody,
and then you need a shuttle bus to be able to get everyone from
well,
the
we
parking
talked to
deck
one of the employees, and he's like, we don't want to park in that thing because it's literally, I think, to get from the from the parking deck at the far end into the building might take 20 minutes. Like I was like, this is crazy. Nobody's going to want to park there. It's going to require an extra half hour to commute every morning.
Yeah.
So anyway,
the other thing that we did learn is that Elon mentioned that the new Optimus 22-degree freedom hand will be able to play the piano. Basically do that. Now we found out he didn't say this, but there was a private tour for 15 other golden ticket winners
lucky people
that we had an opportunity to meet the night before and prompted them with a couple of questions to find out.
Elon and Franz were probably like, boy, these guys are really astute with their questions, and that's Scott.
And pretty much they wanted to know where the degrees of freedom are, and it was asked, well, can it do this? So that means independent movement of the fingers.
Right.
So it's going to have one actuator, which means when the fingers do this abduction, adduction kind of movement, they do it together.
Right.
And then they close together, which I guess you can kind of play the piano without.
Yeah, I think you need a little more control.
You need a little bit. You would like to be able to move
play Mary Had a
individual
Little Lamb.
But because you can't move them individually, you can't do the Vulcan live long and prosper. And Elon explicitly said, "Oh, you don't need that. That's not a useful gesture."
Well, yeah, it's not. I mean, that's the whole point of it.
Yes.
This is like,
so that's.
By the way, Leonard Nimoy could not do this. They did a thing where he had to basically learn how to do it. He didn't know how.
He had to throw.
Yeah, and they would do things like sometimes what they would do is he would place it like this. So you'll see he'll actually raise his hand like this because he couldn't actually do it. I think by the end he could. But
I remember trying to learn that as a kid.
Oh, I did too. It took a long time to learn how to do
and the only way I get it is one day I went like this and I heard something pop. Oh, hey, now it works.
So anyway, it is not a useful feature. It's not something that people have to know.
Exactly. But it shows that you don't have which means. In order to be able to move them individually, you would need an individual actuator for each one of them, which means you would need 4 actuators.
Right.
But by doing this, you can
use
link them together. And
7 actuators, is that correct?
So that's what I suspect. So now we know the actuators are going to start moving back into the wrist.
Right. And it'll be sort of cable driven, we think.
Through there. And now if they're thinking of some other movements, I'm not aware, but the 22 degrees of freedom, we're pretty sure they're adding an extra wrist, everything else. But if
extra joint, you mean, not extra wrist.
Sorry, knuckle.
Knuckle, there we go. That's what I was
thinking. Yeah, extra knuckle on there. Because they only have 2 knuckles right now, and you really need to have 3, where the first knuckle's here, second, third. And moving the actuators back here means you're redesigning the lower arm. And if you're redesigning the lower arm, you're redesigning the whole thing. I mean, it was like an easy call to say, if they're changing that, they're changing the whole lot.
And I mean, I would assume that we're talking about down to the actuators and stuff. They've probably just learned a lot of stuff about how much power, how much torque they need in the actuators, how big they, I would not be surprised if some of them shrink a little bit because they're like, oh, we don't need that much.
I think they're going to probably find a way to slim those things down.
Oh, not just in the hand, but I'm talking about even in the hips and stuff. They may be like, we don't need that much.
They may be redesigning the mechanics because they may be saying, you know what, there's a reason we can't walk as fast as we'd like to.
Right, exactly.
So that might be part of the redesign is figuring out what they can do to make sure they can get this thing to walk, 3 to 5 miles per hour.
Right. And the difference between Gen 1 Optimus, which was very Terminator looking or something, and Gen 2. Gen 2 is beautiful compared to Gen 1. Yeah. And if there's that kind of, I don't expect it to be that big of a jump, but let's say 50% of that jump in terms of the quality and the alterations and the manufacturability, because that's what they're really aiming for. Is how can we make 1 million of these a year?
So so the changes we can potentially see is maybe a redesign of the shoulder, that they come up with something really clever that's closer to that. And if they do that, they're probably going to be changing the hip.
Yep.
Maybe you get some more movement in the torso, so it actually can get in and out of the
at least
car.
one joint in the torso would be valuable.
And certainly do something down here as far as the buttocks area, because right now you have those motors that if you want it to sit down, it's going to tear up your seats.
Yeah, exactly.
So you would need to have something that's designed better. And maybe they come up with a completely different leg and knee mechanism that...
So maybe it won't be 50% different.
It'll be like 100%. It could be. I mean, those are the potential areas that... It may be that they have a lot of power there, but they don't have enough speed. So they may be saying, oh, there's something wrong with speed.
Well, and they might go from linear drives to rotary drives for some of the joints to make it be able to walk faster or do something.
It's possible.
And still every bot, even Unitree and stuff like that, they all walk with their bent knees because of the center of gravity and balance issues. So it would be if Tesla can get to a point where one of these things can walk with straight legs, which is like a human does, I don't know that that's necessary because it can get away with walking like that, but it's not elegant. There's something still wrong with it because humans can do it. We can walk with straight legs.
One of the things that with Optimus is you've actually noticed where the hip joint is for walking forward.
Yeah.
Is that the movement that's going on? With us, we like articulate right about here. So that's basically where we're rotating. Optimus is like
way
down here.
There, yeah.
It's down there because the way the motors are set up.
Right.
And what that means is your leg length and your stride length is a little bit different.
Yeah.
So they may think about, we have to redesign the mechanism because it's the way they design the mechanics which kind of force that.
Right.
And we've seen a couple other, let's say, hip and pelvic designs coming out of some of the bots in China.
Right.
That maybe they will actually learn from those designs since their designs are being stolen. It's like
trade-off.
Yep.
Yeah, and again, a lot of this is just data. You make these things, you put them in the factory, you try to teach them to walk and stuff, and you're like, oh, this is a hard limit. This is just a physical limit that we designed it wrong. Okay, now what can we do to like make this work? Interesting how much. Like Sanctuary has paid attention to the hands for a long time, because there's like that's the important part, and
Sanctuary does have the individual control.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
they can do that.
Right, but I'm just saying, like,
however, what's interesting based on the patent that they have,
right,
the middle finger
is
actually is unable to move, and everything was relative to it. So I think when you see it do it, it's more like that with the middle finger kind of straight as opposed to coming over like that.
If I can do it right, like the middle finger would stay.
I mean, because for the most part, when you move your hand, the middle finger almost stays
right.
stationary.
Yeah, I mean it's unimportant.
You can move it, but I mean, it's like requires a lot of concentration.
Yeah. So, but it's just interesting to see that Tesla is taking the tack that they're like, oh yeah, we need to do this now. For a while they were like, yeah, this is a good enough hand, but then the second generation significantly better, and of course with pressure sensors, and then third generation is going to be like, if it's got doubles the degrees of freedom. That they clearly are paying a lot of attention to the hand.
Yeah.
And I think that's, I think maybe what they're thinking is less about specific use cases and more about long-term strategy. It's like we need to make this thing as flexible as possible so that we don't have to go back in and rejigger it and redesign it next year because there's another thing that we need to add.
Well, part of it is, remember, one of the questions that came up is like, would there be different form factors? So if you have an operation that
Elon's response was exactly what I was thinking.
Yes, and well, think about that battery thing.
Yeah.
What do you need the legs for? Why don't we just put one there or that? And his response was like, no, once you get it to scale and you're producing it as a commodity, it costs you more to have these variants.
Exactly.
So again, the same thing is like, well, why don't we come up with a hand that's only for grabbing because I don't need this movement?
Yeah, G.I. Joe is Kung Fu grip.
If we've got the line set up to be able to produce the hand and we can produce this hand for about the same price that we can produce this one, let's just produce that hand. Maybe you have more functionality you need, but it may turn out that, wow, I need this. Now, with software, you could lock that. You could say, you know what? We're going to put the hardware in there, but it's only going to be able to do this. And if you want to have that, we will charge you a little bit more. There could be an upcharge for that.
Yeah. Again, it's the same thing as with the cars. Tesla is famous for, they've got 3 varieties of the Model Y. There's but basically it's the same car. It's like the 1 motor, 2 motor, and performance, and those are very small tweaks to it and doesn't change anything in the rest of the vehicle. And similarly, the reason they do it is because the economies of scale. Instead of building 50 different SUVs and each one's only being 100,000 manufactured or something, you make millions of these things, and so you get a lot more economies of scale. Same thing with the bot, and so it would make a lot of sense.
The same thing. And at that point, because the price gets driven down so much with the economy of scales, when you try to come up with these custom configurations, they cost way more.
Exactly.
So, for example, out on the Cybertruck line that we're looking at, there was a very simple example that just putting sealant on that small triangular wedge that's there. Yeah. And
a side window on the driver.
And I'd seen a picture of it when you did that tour last time.
That's right. I was able to take pictures of video then.
And so they have a Fennec robot, 6-axis robot, that is where its last wrist is the end effector is able to do this and it's able to do that. But then
it's basically got caulk on the end.
Right. But then it has a caulking gun where the caulking gun is going down this direction.
Right.
And now the thing with a caulking gun, which is strange, is that normally a caulking gun you don't care about the direction of it.
Right.
But this is set up in such a way that the tip has to spin in the direction of travel as it goes around.
Right. Because you want a very even bead.
Because of the way it's mounted on the arm, you can't actually use the robot axes to get it to do that rotation for you.
Right.
So they put a dedicated servo on there to spin the tip around.
Right.
And this is a flat 2D thing. The problem is basically a 3D problem. You have an XY movement and you have a rotation.
Right.
You can do that with just 3 motors. That would be very, very simple to set up a configuration. You've got a 6-axis arm. You've built end of arm tooling that's got 7. And like, well, wait a minute, there's 4 actuators you don't need.
Right, and a lot of engineering involved too.
Why don't you do that? Because if you had designed a mechanism to be able to do that was custom for it, it would cost you 3 times more than that Fennec robot.
Right.
So the whole idea is that these things are commodities. You can go out, you can buy them. They are so cheap compared to the engineering. The same with Optimus. I don't need to use legs on Optimus.
Yeah.
Then just let him stand there.
Right, exactly.
Or put him in a chair. Let him sit. You can do something like that.
Tie him to the wall for all you care.
Because you might change your mind that it actually needs to deploy.
Right.
Yeah.
But the big thing is, it's like, okay, here's the deal. You're like, I don't need it to be able to walk. I don't need the legs. And they're like, so they're like, okay, here, you can buy Optimus for $20,000. You're like, oh, I want it without the legs. That's going to be $40,000. Which one are you going to buy? You're going to buy the $20,000 one with legs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, why would you buy a custom one that's more expensive? And that's exactly the problem.
Well, remember, I mean, you used to be able to buy the Chrysler Sebring without the roof.
You could buy the convertible without the roof?
Well, no, basically.
Yes, right.
Take the roof off, okay?
Yeah, exactly, right.
And it just costs them so much more. And so they actually what they did is they literally built the Sebring, and then they cut the roof off, and then they put everything in there.
Which is insane.
Which was easier than actually having a variant that was designed to be a convertible to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah, my mom had one of those for a while. I was like, this has got to be a dangerous car because it didn't feel like it was built properly for a convertible. But anyway, I think it's important for people to understand economies of scale. And when everyone's like, and yes, eventually there will be dog bots and spider bots and all that stuff, but that's like a ways into the future. That's like after you build a lot of these things, and then you start to go like, yeah, we could make 10 million of these or something. Then it's like, okay, well that makes sense if you can but if you're only making like a couple thousand, it's like that would be insane. That's bespoke. That's the reason why when you go and you buy like some sort of like very fancy knife or something that some guy hand built, it's like really expensive because it's like
so your focus at the beginning is like, we want to get the line. I mean, think about when the Apple iPhone came out, it was like one color.
Yeah.
It was years before you could actually get them different colors. Because like, we just got to get them out.
Well, but then the different colors are also like, they're selling number one at scale, but number two, that's just the fascia, right? You know, you're making like a few million, and everything else internally is the exact same thing.
Yeah, so, exactly. But still, I mean, that what seems like a minor change. Was no, that's just too hard. Let's just get them out because no one has iPhones right now. We got to get them out there, flood the market, make sure they have it, and then later on we can talk about personalizing.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be the same things like, no one's got bots right now. We've got to get them bots out. And then once you have enough of them, and then you start seeing there are people who there's a large demand for some kind of variant.
Exactly.
And it could be the variant is like, we need a 3-arm version for some reason, because we all know that when we do tasks around the house, we always need
I'm telling you, if that plumbing thing, if it had an arm out of the stomach that could like hold the thing while you're like, that would be great. So yeah, but so don't look for those to come anytime soon. That's going to be after you have millions of these bots out there and the data starts to arrive of like, we could make several million of this variety that's different.
It's an
then
easy,
it would make
easy
sense.
switch, yeah. But at that point, first you have to get the line up, you have to understand how to build it.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff. In terms of the Cybertruck, any revelations from the tour?
Not necessarily anything as far as the construction. I mean, we had a chance to ride around it. It's really pretty cool. I mean, the rear wheel steering is just something else.
And it's got, apparently, Lance said there's, what is it right now, 3 or 4 degrees, and it's going to be 7?
Wow.
And the reason why it's going to be 7, this is funny, that I can't remember who told me this, it was yesterday, but apparently it's Elon, because there's a spot that he wants to make a turn, and he can't do it with a single turn with 4 degrees, but if it has 7, he can do it, so that's why 7. So it's an Elon, but that's going to be great for all of us. It'll make it even tighter turn. We'll be able to do that. We have to like get going here, but real quick, any like big picture stuff from Elon's speech? We got to break it down. There's a lot.
I think the most important thing is he says this is not a new chapter. It's a new test. It's a new book. Okay, and I absolutely agree that this whole thing with Optimus and everything, and with Robotaxi, it really is a new book.
Right. So the first chapter of that new book almost definitely is going to be the Cybercab reveal on August 8th. I mean, it just seems the timing of that. So, Tesla version 2.0 book is chapter 1 is going to be Cybercab. And then chapter 2 is probably going to be some sort of next gen Optimus or something along those lines.
So basically S curves on S curves.
S curves on S curves. $25 trillion opportunity on Optimus, plus another 5 or 6 for the Cybercab. $30+ trillion, a market, you put a PE ratio of 10 on that. Look, I mean, the kind of valuation for this company is kind of like, what? And we're probably only looking at about 10 years from now before we can get to that kind of like rate. So definitely not next year, definitely not 2028. But we will
have to have a long-term horizon.
And then, as Jim Fan says, slowly, then suddenly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Gradually, then suddenly.
Yep. It'll really ramp. So, again, definitely not investment advice, but since it was a shareholder meeting, it was really cool to see that. Also, just great to see Elon, and Elon was in such a good mood. He came out and did a star jump at the beginning. He was so happy about the vote and everything, so he was very happy. Also sad to see Martin Vieja leaving. He was not even there. I guess he watched the live stream, and now he's going to go travel for a while. So happy trails. Yep. Enjoy your travels. And we're going off to Tesla Takeover Michigan. If you're there, come say hi. We'll be there.
Please.
Absolutely.
Come on up here if you're
and
in the area.
Robot Love.
Yes.
We need a new version of this with the new hands, with the new hands. That would be really cool.
Yes.
Look how primitive those look now. It's got blocks on it and everything. So anyway, cool. Everybody have a lovely day. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.